Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas and this is how to create a Resident Evil clone in Unity, and welcome to episode 7. In this tutorial we're going to make sure we have our triggers working correctly to switch between the cameras, and we're also going to basically stop our guy from walking through walls with a tiny little bit of physics. Don't forget, click the subscribe button and click the bell icon as well to stay up to date with every tutorial I upload in this series and indeed everything else on my channel. With that in mind, let's get to work. So, of the couple of things we're going to cover in this tutorial, the first one I do want to touch on is that little bit of physics to stop our guy walking through the wall. So currently, yep, we can walk, but we can just kind of intersect any kind of object, which isn't what we need. We need to stop him walking through this wall, and although we added a box collider to him last time, this isn't enough. What we need to do is go to Add Component on our soldier, go down to Physics, and then click on Rigid Body. I'm not going to too much depth with Rigid Body right now because it's something we'll deal with more when we come into things like AI later on in the development cycle. But basically, all Rigid Body will do is apply a bit of gravity, physics, and kind of restraint on the actual model itself. That's just kind of a brief way of putting it. Might also be wise to restrain it on the rotation for X and Z if you do have any problems. So if we press play and try and walk through the wall, we now can't, which is fine because we don't want to do that anyway. But do make sure you have the box collider on, because that is where it becomes a little bit important for the sense of what we're going to do next, which is the trigger to change the camera over. So I did say earlier in the series that having too many back-facing cameras isn't really Resident Evil style, and it isn't representative of how Resident Evil works. So I'm going to take this opportunity to move camera 2. So I want to turn it back on. And rather than have it facing this way, I am actually going to move it over here. So if I just bring it to 0 on the rotation and simply move it this way a little bit. Now let's see if we can bring it somewhere here and rotate on the Y. Look down a little bit. There we go. So what should happen is we'll walk our guy. His name is Jake Bullet, by the way. He'll walk through here. We can see on the camera preview. As he walks here, we'll shift to this camera view. And then we're also going to have another camera view, which is looking this way. So let's also take this opportunity to take camera 002. Hold Control, press D to duplicate. And let's bring it into a position over here. It's up to you how you want to display your cameras. There's no real set way. Just keep in mind of the restraints, I say, of having too many back angles. So if I bring that to about there, because we'll end up having a door here. So now we have 3 cameras. Let's reorganize to there, change that to camera 3 and turn 2 and 3 off. So next thing we want to do is create a trigger round about this point, which will switch from camera 1 to camera 2. So let's go to our scripts folder. Let's go to the camera folder, and the main scripts in here will be pretty much all the camera switches, but we can recycle the cameras over, or rather the scripts over and over. We don't need to have a camera script for every single place. We can reuse them, or rather we're going to set them up to reuse them. So let's go into our first cam script. And remember, this one was done via a coroutine where we'd be able to switch it after a certain length of time. So we're going to annotate out that section just in case, because it could come in useful in a later script. So to do that, where we have enumerator, camera switch, just have // and you can annotate out all of this. What this means is that this section of the code will not run. And let's also do that with start coroutine camera switch. Now you could theoretically create a brand new script, but for all intents and purposes I'm going to keep this one and add to it. I'm going to keep the variables as they are, camera 1, camera 2, cam on, and camera number. What I'm going to do is on void start, we'll keep camera number equals 1. Down here, we're going to have void on trigger enter, and it will set it by private by default. And in here in the parentheses, you'll have collider and other. We do need to keep that in there. Now you can change what other says. However, for this instance, I'm keeping it as the default. You could have it something more relative, but what it's basically going to mean is the player itself, i.e. whatever is walking into the trigger. So to do that, we need to make sure that whatever is coming into the trigger zone is our player and not a zombie or an enemy or something else. So we can achieve that by using tags. So if we head back into Unity, go to our soldier, and here where we have tag, drop down and click on player. So now what that does is that sets this object as tag player, and that means that we can control whatever the script is going to receive from whatever object is coming through it. So to do that, we need to have if, in brackets, other, because this other is referenced here, dot tag equals, and this is a double equals. The reason we use double equals is because we are checking. We don't use a single equals because a single equals is stating. So in this case, we need to put if other.tag is equal, and then in quotes, to whatever we've called the tag. In this case, it's player. So if other, the tag, is equal to player, which it will be, then we do the following. So close bracket and open curly bracket. Here what we're going to do is we are going to say camera 2 is on. So, oops, camera 2 dot set active, and in brackets true, semicolon, and then we have camera 1 dot set active false, semicolon. And it really is as simple as that. So the idea of what we've done here in this script is we have said that if we're entering this trigger zone, if we are the player, then we switch camera. Now, although I did say I was going to keep all of this, the whole idea of us writing this section of the script was to learn just a couple of things in the script. We were never going to stick with that script, but that section might come in handy later on. The thing is it really worth keeping the script? Because it's a couple of lines. We could rewrite it all over again. And I feel kind of bad because we'd already written this script, but I think you've already got that education now of coding from that tutorial. So let's go ahead and let's just get rid of it. I am going to keep camera number equals 1, although that's not relative to anything now. The same with the bool up here, it's not relative to anything. When we make more advanced scripting for the cameras, they will become relevant. So I am definitely going to keep those two variables there and this camera number right here. So I'm going to save that script. And now let's put this into practice. I may actually change the name of camera 1 and camera 2 because we have 3 cameras now, but I want to make these scripts reusable. But we can always get to that later on. So to make that trigger, what we need to do is create an object which stretches across here, and we can actually mark it as a trigger zone. So to do that, we go to Game Object, go to 3D Object, and go to Cube. Yep, I know we've dealt with cubes before, but cubes are the fundamental pieces of Unity, and you'll be amazed at what you can do with just a cube. So what you'll want to do now is move this cube around until it's roughly, if you're in the same sort of position as me, roughly somewhere around here. So let's expand the cube on the X to about there. Probably rotate it a little on the Y. And then let's bring it into position here. It won't matter too much if it's intersecting with walls, because remember, although it's a trigger zone, the walls aren't classed as the player tag, are they? So you're not going to have any problems with the script working. So let's then tick is trigger down here, and then untick mesh renderer. And what that will do is it will set the object as completely invisible. So although we know it's there, you won't see it when we play the game. For example, if I just click down here now, it's disappeared, but it still exists. So when we tick is trigger, it does mean that we won't get stuck or stopped on the actual object itself, but you do have to make sure box collider is ticked. Now what we need to do is drag first cam onto that cube, and tell you what we'll do, let's take the environment thing up here, hold control, press D. Let's bring it up here and just rename it as camera triggers. So camera triggers. So this section here is going to be just for the camera triggers. So let's move cube up here and let's rename this as trigger 0, 1. Might rename it later on, but we'll see where we get to. I'm aware as well the soldier is in the camera section, so let's move him out of here. And let's create another section down below. And we'll call this one characters. So that could be anything from the character himself, or a zombie, or a monster, or anything that is movable within the scene. So we've set that trigger there. We just need to set camera 1 there. Make sure you do it right, Jimmy. So camera 1, camera 2. And you may come across a problem if you try doing this. If you do come across a problem, I'll explain what we have to do a little further. So now, if we press play, we're able to just kind of turn on the spot, walk forward a little bit, but it won't change our actual camera now. So after 5 seconds, it won't change over because we've removed that coroutine. So let's walk forward. And as we walk forward, there is our camera change. You may have a little bit of a problem if by where you're walking through this way and it doesn't change the camera. It could be the fact that you don't have your box collider or collider in general set up correctly on those objects. So what happens if we walk back through here? Nothing will happen because we haven't set the inverse of that actual trigger. So for every trigger that activates, there has to be a trigger that deactivates. So the best way to do this in this case, because most scenes are never going to have really more than 4 cameras, I don't think. You may have some complex scenes, but you don't need to worry too much about having too many triggers or anything like that, because Unity can handle thousands upon thousands upon thousands of objects in one single scene. So I'm going to take this trigger 0, 1. I'm going to hold control, press D, and I'm actually going to bring it to here. Now, like I say, this is the basic way of doing it, and we're going to be able to change from one camera to another repeatedly by going through these triggers, but there needs to be a more natural way of doing it, and I want to just get the basics set up before we go any further into development. So I'm going to rename this to trigger 1. We'll have this one as trigger 1 back, and we'll rename this one as trigger 0, 1 forward. So going forward in the scene and then coming backward in the scene. So the back trigger, if I select them both, this is the back one, this is the forward one. You have to make sure that both of these are in the correct position. It doesn't matter too much if they are, intersected with each other, but you have to make sure that the very edge of the back trigger is at the back and the very front of the forward trigger is at the front. So there is a difference between the two. You can actually make these a bit thinner if you want to, which I think I will do actually. I'll do it 0.1 each. There's still a trigger zone, which is just fine. You may find it useful if you turn the mesh renderer back on and just move them a little bit closer like that so you can see just how close the trigger zone is. And then turn them off on the mesh renderer. So the back object, although we've got camera 1 here, camera 2, I do think we'll rename them in a moment. But what we need to do is have camera 1 as the second option and camera 2 as the first option. The reason is we turned the second camera on. The second camera on. You know what I mean, guys. This is where the numbers get confusing. So we turn camera 2 on, which is the second camera we have in the script. So we turn that on, and camera 1 off. So if we press play now, we should be able to walk this way. No problem. Turn around and walk back. So that is how we can make, nice and easily, the camera system for Resident Evil, and we've done it just using one script. So now let's change these. So camera forward, camera back. So camera forward, camera back. Save that script. And I'll tell you what I will do, guys. I'll actually re-upload this script to the website so you can download it if you do have any problems. But what we're going to do now is reuse that exact same script, the exact same triggers to activate that third camera down there. So I'm going to take trigger 01 forward and back, hold control, press T to duplicate them. And let's set the rotation on the Y back to 0. In fact, we need to have them across, don't we? So let's have that set as 90. And then let's simply move them into position down here. We'll need to expand on the X. Again, doesn't matter if they intersect the walls because it's still only searching for the player. Now just make sure the forward trigger is in the right place. The back trigger is in the right place. So back is always that way. Forward is always this way because this is the end trigger that you want to activate. It may take a little bit of getting used to get your positioning right, to kind of get your head around it, I guess. But ultimately, you'll get there. So let's move those triggers up here. Let's have trigger 02 forward. So the camera forward is going to be camera 3. And the camera we're going to turn off is 2. So remember, at this point when we get here, camera 1 is going to be off no matter what because we've already passed the other trigger. So now let's set that the inverse. So if we're heading backwards, camera 2 needs to come on and camera 3 needs to go off. In fact, you know what? I'm going to change that again. Sorry, guys. Camera on, camera off. Because it makes more sense, doesn't it, really? Because I'm saying on and off. You'll do this a lot when you're developing games. You'll go back and forth between scripts because you're changing things constantly to make more sense. I mean, I came up with that idea of forward and back, but yeah, realistically, that doesn't make sense in this instance. So now we just need to set those cameras on again. I apologize, guys. So camera 2 on trigger 01 forward. And then camera 1 goes off. So then the inverse of that, camera 1 comes on, camera 2 goes off. Then on forward, camera 3 comes on and camera 2 goes off. And then back, camera 2 comes on and camera 3 goes off. And let's save our scene to make sure everything is good, saved. And now let's try this out. So we should walk here, change the camera, walk forward. There we go. So there is a little bit of a blank space, we could say, in the game itself. So what that means is let's adjust camera 2 to be in a more meaningful position. So let's bring it to probably about there. And camera 3 also needs to be in a bit more of a meaningful position. So we can use that to our advantage, pull it out to there, oops, and bring it to about there. There we go. So now let's turn 2 and 3 off and let's check out our final camera setup for Resident Evil. So hopefully, guys, you can see just how this is working now and just how much like the Resident Evil series that it is actually becoming. Okay, so it looks like we need to move these triggers this way just a little bit. So let's try there. I'll try one more time while I tell you what's going to happen in the next tutorial. So next time what I want to do is I want to modify the animation a little bit so we can actually walk backwards properly, because currently if we try walking backwards, our character moonwalks. So we're going to sort that out. You can see him moonwalking backwards, doing all the cameras back to where he started. So we'll sort that out. We're going to do some particles as well, and probably start looking at some environment and see what we can build up. So guys, until that next tutorial, thank you very much for watching.